You guys, look what we found. So I had to come to Harbor Freight because I'm getting a few other tools, and of course I got to go by the router aisle, and Dad saw that they finally came out with a Hercules cordless router. Today we're going to do a review on it. So we're filming this as of like March 17th. I'm pretty sure that's the date. And they're having a deal where if you buy a battery and a charger, normally that's 120 bucks, you get it for $99, you get to pick a tool for free. So for that kind of deal, it's like, why not? Now we're gonna head back to the shop, we're gonna modify our router the way we always do, and we're gonna run it through the paces and see how it does.
We're back at the shop. So here's what we did. We took the charger that came with the deal and our 5 amp hour battery, and we got it all charged up. Now it says when that 5 amp hour battery is fully discharged, it takes 90 minutes to fully charge it up. They did have an actual fast charger that I think cuts that in about half, but that one didn't come with this deal. So we went ahead and charged this thing up. Now we gotta bust this box open and see what we got. So here's what came in the box. First, obviously, we've got the router. Then we've got a typical edge guide. Then we have a template guide. We have the dust collector port. We have the roller guide, and then we have a double-ended wrench. So first we have the edge guide. Now this is pretty typical in these routers that I've seen, although this one's really built stout. This thing doesn't have any flex to it, no deflection going on there. It's got a locking wing nut, so pretty good for an edge guide. We really don't use these much, but typically this is as good as I've seen on these kind of routers. Next we have the dust port, or the dust port manifold, however you want to say it. It's got a little screw that holds it in place, but it just pops in place, and then the screw goes right into the housing, which makes sure that it won't come off. So pretty typical. I've seen many dust ports that look like this, but it's well built. Nice that they throw that in. Next we have a template guide. Now this is unique because I've never really seen one of these routers that came with a template guide right out of the box. This one is interesting. I've never seen one that mounts this way either. You actually remove the base plate, the stock base plate, and then there's a recess in the housing of the router, and you put this template guide in there in the slot, and then the base plate goes back on and friction holds it in place. Pretty cool idea. Next we have the roller guide. Now this is something totally unique. I've never even seen one of these. Maybe you guys have. But this came in the box and I certainly didn't expect it. What this does is it mounts in the same place that the edge guide mounts. It has a bearing on the bottom that will follow the edge of the material. So if you have a straight bit that doesn't have a bearing on it, but you want to use it for a trim bit or even cutting dados or rabbets, this will allow you to use a straight bit without a bearing to do that. And it's adjustable, quite a bit adjustable, so you can move it in and out. But the fact that they included this in the box of this inexpensive little router, pretty impressive. Next we have a double end wrench. Now this one end of it fits actually the armature and the other end fits the collet nut. So here's the thing that is a little perplexing. It does have a shaft lock. So in most cases you're going to use the shaft lock and then the big end just to tighten and loosen your bits. But if something happens to that shaft lock, and we've had that happen before, then you've got the small end that actually fits on the armature, and then you'll just use a separate wrench the right size for the collet nut. I'm not sure why they just didn't put 2 separate wrenches in there. Seems like that would have been a better choice, but this is what they put. Okay, let's go over this thing from top to bottom. So first thing first is this thing feels pretty substantial. It doesn't feel chintzy at all. It feels nice and solid. Definitely an upgrade from the Bauer. We got our 5 amp hour battery. It goes on nice and easy. One thing I'm a little hesitant about is it has a little bit of a wiggle to it. I wish that was fit a little solid. Again, it goes on nice and easy and off nice and easy, but I really wish it didn't have that play. So now let's get into the meat. We're talking about the depth adjustment. Now the depth adjustment wheel I kind of like it. A lot of them that have this type of a system, the wheel doesn't stick out. It doesn't protrude out from the housing very well. This one definitely does, and I like that. A lot more room to get your thumb on there. The other thing I like is it's got up and down arrows, tell you which way to turn in order to go whichever direction you want. So now let's talk about the depth adjustment itself and the rack and pinion system that they've got on here. It's okay. Again, I'm not a rack and pinion guy when it comes to depth adjustment on here. It's not my favorite. It's very functional and you can definitely use it. I'm more of the DeWalt Flex, an adjustment ring, but it's basically like most of the other rack and pinions. It works just fine. Let's go to the switch. This switch works really well. I like the delayed reaction when you hit the on button. The LED lights come on right away, but it takes a second or two for you to hold the button in order for the router to go on. I really like that safety feature. This push button switch, again, there's nothing wrong with it. Just my personal preference is I like the toggle switch. It's got a nice soft start, so it doesn't take off and full speed right off the bat. And then the stop is not immediate, but it is a pretty fast stop. One thing they did that's nice is they actually put a scale right on the motor itself. Tells you where you're at from 0 to 1.5 inches full depth. That's not something really that Ryan and I use because we go by sight and we use our depth gauge in order to know how deep we are. So much like other routers this size, this type, it's got a variable speed from 1 to 6. That is from 10,000 RPM up to 30,000 RPM. Fairly typical. I generally run my routers full speed. One thing I do like on this switch on the variable speed is it's got solid stops at the numbers. Not all of them have that. So like I mentioned before, this has got a shaft lock. Feels pretty good, nice and solid. However, the bower felt nice and solid until it broke after a month or two. One thing that I really like is the fact that they put a notch on the actual armature itself so you can use a double wrench setup like we talked about before. So many of you already know this. We freehand route wood signs and we use these routers specifically for doing that. So we've got to modify this thing. We're going to take it out, drill the hole in the back, and we're going to put our base plate on. Now we have base plates for a lot of different routers, but this isn't one of them. This has got a different hole pattern. So we're going to put our blank base plate on here. We'll put a link in the description below that'll send you over to a video that'll show you exactly how to install that blank base plate.
So a lot of you are probably wondering, will modifying the router void the warranty? And to be honest, it more than likely will. But most people modify their tools in one way or the other. Now we do this for several reasons. Number one is we film with our routers. So in order for the camera to be able to see what the router bit is doing, we have to have this hole there. But even before we were filming, Dad and Grandpa used to do this all the time to every single router. And the main reason is, number one, it lets more natural light in, and number two, it allows the sawdust to go somewhere other than just blowing back at you. Now for the blank base plate, Dad used the original as a template to get exactly where the holes need to be. He used a small drill bit to get the pilot holes, and then he used a larger drill bit to fit the screws in. Once the holes are drilled, then he just uses a countersink to make sure that the head of the screws sits below the surface of the router base. It's really simple, and again, I will leave a link in the description below for a video that gives a little bit more in-depth on how to do this.
So we got our housing modification done. We got our blank base plate installed. Now let's do some testing. So we just did a test with a deep chamfer. It ran just fine. Then I set it even deeper yet, and I did some scallops. Wasn't anything super special, but it certainly did the job in this piece of hardwood. So it performed just fine on that test. So we want to give it one more stress test. So we figured the best way to do that, put our big 3/8 90 in there and use that same piece of hardwood, set it nice and deep, and see what kind of stress that puts on the motor. It actually did really well. It chattered a little bit, but that could have to do with the fact that this is a super hard piece of wood, and it could have been just the bit chattering a little bit. But as far as power, Didn't have any problem at all. It kind of plowed right through it. So there we are, guys. That is the new Hercules 20-volt cordless brushless router. Now, we just got this thing. It's just brand new out of the box. We've just given it a couple little tests, give you kind of our take on this thing. We're gonna use it for the next 6 months. Something may change in that, so we'll put this thing under the test. We use our routers all the time, so we'll give this thing a fair test long term, but short term, got to say I'm pretty happy with it. Again, it's not a super high priced router. It's not super high quality, but you know what? For the money, I think it's a pretty good deal. I would definitely recommend it as of right now. So if you guys get this thing and you try it, let me know what you think. Leave some comments down below. Thanks for watching, guys. We sure appreciate it. Have a great one. Bye-bye.